Thank you, John. The NASCAR Sprint Cup Series set for a history-making weekend. Final practice coming your way from the Kentucky Speedway in Sparta, Kentucky. And as the cars roll off for the first time today, we give you the weather. It's warmed up since earlier. 81 degrees. Humidity has gone down. Cloudy skies after rain earlier today. Good to have you with us for final practice on speed with Kyle Petty and Darrell Waltrip. I'm Adam Alexander, and you know we're not going to wipe the smile off his face all weekend long. You're back in your home state of Kentucky, and I'll tell you, drivers got a lot to say about this racetrack.
Yeah, and you know, we needed to water the bluegrass. So we had just had a little bit of rain, you know, just water the grass a little bit, but that's not going to dampen our spirits at all. I've been out in the outfield out here talking to camper area and talking to fans, and they said, you know, it's beautiful. We love it. The rain didn't bother us one bit. The drivers love the racetrack. They like being here. There's so much enthusiasm in the air. Kyle, it's a great weekend for racing.
Anytime we go to a new place, I think when you look at that, you remember going to Chicago for the first time, going to Texas for the whole community gets excited. And I think it shows by the sellout that this whole community is excited. They've waited for this race for so long, and the infield is packed. That's amazing. You say you've been out with those crazy people? I'm not going out with those fans. Are you crazy?
They're my people, buddy. They're my people.
Not mine, man. Not mine.
If he went down there, he would fit in. All right? So we open up the Kentucky Speedway, and here's a cat that knows all about opening up racetracks. Jeff Gordon, 3 times in his career, has gone to Victory Lane at an inaugural event. Most recent 10 years ago at Kansas. He also did it in Indy in '94 and back in 1997 at the Auto Club Speedway.
And guys, did you know this track has a couple of bumps in it?
Wait a minute. I thought you designed this racetrack.
No, I didn't.
You put bumps in these racetracks.
I did not put the
Darrell
bumps.
Waltrip put bumps in this racetrack. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, right here on Speed.
Every time somebody said that, well, it's a great place, big sellout crowd, but this track's bumpy.
He designed it after he retired, Marty Snyder.
Well, and I hope he's in charge of the weather, because the guys are happy that the sun's back out and they get a chance to go practice. One of those really happy, Kevin Harvick, who told me yesterday his car was just okay in race trim. Right now they're making a qualifying run. In fact, Harvick coming back into the garage said the car a little too loose in 1 and 2, 3 and 4. He liked it there, but Harvick said we need some laps today. We need some time on this racetrack. Even though they got a whole day yesterday to test this car out, they want more time trying to get race trim ready on this 29 car. Let's head right next door to Chris Neville.
Well, hey, Marty, Carl Edwards has led the points for the past 10 races, but he gave that up last week after a 37th finish at Daytona to Kevin Harvick, and he told me right before he got in the car that he's not so sure that they have the right strategy for this practice session. The team is focusing on race trim, so don't look for the 99 to put up a good lap early on and try and get a good position in the qualifying order. He said they're going to work on race trim for about the first half of this practice session when he thinks the track is going to be quickest, and then switch over to qualifying trim later.
And Edwards right now living up to billing, 15th of the 15 cars that have been on track.
Okay, I got a question. So they came yesterday, and they ran all day long yesterday. This is the first time they've been on the track today, and we're calling this final practice.
I don't know.
Is that what they said?
I mean, that's what we're calling it, but
okay,
I can't figure it out.
So qualifying order will be set off this practice. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Because yesterday was an open test.
Absolutely, because it's the only one.
It's the only one. I'm just trying to clarify that. I realized yesterday, but I mean, for the fans at home, they just talk about being on the racetrack all day, and as we go to qualifying order, I mean, I'm trying to get a clarification from me too.
Yesterday they ran 4,011 laps. 6,000 miles were logged on this track yesterday.
That means absolutely nothing.
So it does. Well,
no,
it
I mean to what we're doing today. It means.
But Kyle, I liked what they did yesterday. I wish they did it more.
Oh yeah.
You could come with the telemetry in your car. You could come. Yesterday they tested fuel injection. And you're at the right track with the right tires with everybody here. Makes the most sense of anything they do. I wish they did it more.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before when we had it, when I was part of an ownership group of a team, that it was cheaper for us to come a day early or stay a day late than to drag your stuff all the way across country to test for 2 days. Because you already had the hotel rooms, you already had moved your people, you already had your per diem, you already had your salaries. All you needed was a couple extra sets of tires, and you could be there. This is a good way to save these teams a little money and hopefully make the racing a little bit better, because the guys have experience on that track with the right tire.
Yeah, and you don't have to do it every week.
No.
You know, pick a few tracks, because these guys need new information. They need to collect some new data with the car as it changes, the tires as it changes, and they don't have a lot of data for other racetracks. So going and getting some good information on these racetracks, helps set up. It's got to make the racing better. I think it's a smart thing to do.
So Marcus Ambrose, new look for him this week with Porter Cable on the car, and Tums the sponsor this week for David Rudiman. 2 career wins in his Sprint Cup Series career, and both of them mile-and-a-half racetracks.
Yeah, if David and Michael don't quit getting in food fights, I don't know. Poor old David's not going to be able to see the drive. The rib beat him up. The hot dog beat him up. They've had some tough fights. Good thing they got Tums.
And to confirm what Kyle was talking about a moment ago, Sprint Cup teams were scheduled to have 2 practices today. The one we're in now, final practice. They were also supposed to be on track today for an hour from 11:30 to 12:30, and rain washed that one out.
And let's be clear, too, that this is not a place unfamiliar to Cup teams. The Cup teams came here from the time that this place opened. What year did it open?
2000.
2000. From the time this place was open, Cup teams came here and tested extensively because this was the only mile-and-a-half racetrack that you could come to and get a good feel for a lot of places. Now, the problem that Cup teams experienced coming here was nobody ever ran on the same tire. I may be sitting beside Darrell in the garage area, and I'm on a Martinsville tire, and he's on an Atlanta tire. So our speeds were 2 seconds apart, so we were experimenting with different things. So there are a lot of guys who have experience here, but not with the tire that Goodyear has brought here.
There were a lot of people hovering around the 6th garage yesterday during that test period for these teams, and they weren't trying to figure out what they were doing on setup. They were all coming by to say congratulations on that win at Daytona last week.
Well, for 2 years now, Adam, we've been saying this is a breakout year for David Ragan. This is going to be the breakout year for David Ragan. He would do things that would get your attention. He would do things that say, hey, this cat's got what it takes. He's going to be the next big winner in the Cup Series. It's taken him up until last week to get that first win.
Yeah.
I hope it's not too little too late.
No, exactly. And you know, here he is last week at Daytona, and you know, we could be sitting here talking about David Ragan as the Daytona 500 winner and the 4th of July race winner, you know, the Coke Zero 400 winner, if not for the mistake he made. But, you know, a lot went on during that race. But I'm going to say something, and Darrell came to me after I finally won a race after 975 years and said, you know, the first one's the hard one. The next ones, they begin to come easier. And I've got a theory about guys that win races, too, when they win like this. If you go back and you look at Regan Smith this year, and Trevor Bayne is the odd man out on my theory, but if you go back and look at Regan Smith and you look at David Ragan, these guys this year have begun to qualify in the top 4 or 5. They win poles. And once you get to that place and you qualify and you assert yourself there, then you've got to win next. And that's what these guys have done.
Baby steps. Baby steps.
And NASCAR has reminded teams, this being the only practice, qualifying order later will be set off for this practice. And right now, Regan Smith quickest. Let's go to the garage and Chris Neville.
Yeah, Juan Pablo Montoya making some changes to the 42 car right now. Juan, everybody's talking about the bumps. What does that mean? How tough is it to drive around here?
Our target shape is pretty good. It's a handful. Especially 3 and 4 is really hard because the track's really flat. So when you enter the track, it's really flat and full of bumps. When you get hit the bumps right, it makes a big difference.
You got 6 hours of testing yesterday. Is that going to be just so important tomorrow, especially with the rain we've had today?
Yeah, the track right now is really green, so it's very different. So yeah, right now we're just focusing on qualifying. I think most of our race stuff was done yesterday.
Right now, the 42, 26 quick. Marty?
Well, Chris, yesterday in the test day, many people thought Kyle Busch was the best in race trim. They went out and made a qualifying run on their first run. They're getting ready to go out and make a second one. But Darrell and Kyle, one thing Kyle Busch wanted to do inside the car was that he wanted to move the throttle pedal a little bit. And even just like a 1/4 of an inch can make a difference for how you drivers feel it inside the car. This is not the car they ran yesterday. They ran the backup car yesterday. But Kyle wanted that throttle pedal moved more to his liking. A little bit of driver comfort inside the car going on as well, Adam.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, move left or right. Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe how your foot's hitting the pedal. You know, maybe you want to hit on the one side or the other of your foot. The other thing you might be doing too is changing the leverage, so that when he goes to the throttle, maybe the throttle opens a little bit quicker. He shortens up the throw where it'll open up a little bit quicker, or he may be slowing it down where when he gets back in the gas, it's a little slower. So that's one of the things he used to work on a little bit, and particularly on a bumpy racetrack where you were playing with the throttle, you want it to be a little softer and a little slower opening. Might be something he was working on.
I'm glad you moved away from that big word leverage and finally used throw, because I was going to say at the throw on the throttle, not the leverage. You had me on that one a minute.
Talking about Kyle Busch, he was a winner here last night in Truck Series competition, and he will be one of the many drivers competing in both the Nationwide Series this evening and the Sprint Cup race here tomorrow.
It's because the All-Star game's coming up, Kyle. You got to. They're going to throw. See,
I got you. You're off on another sport already.
Oh, just no blending it all in.
I'll blend it all. I got you.
Yeah.
Here's Jamie McMurray, one of 7 drivers to win in 2010 that is not won in 2011. And all of that on top of we've had 12 different winners in 17 races. I mean, this has been as competitive as we've seen in a while.
And I asked Bono a couple weeks ago, I said, Bono, what's wrong? He said, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the problem, and you know that.
I don't know.
Because you can kick rear end one year and come back the next year and feel like you're better prepared and better physically, emotionally, mentally, and the cars are better, and you don't win. The funny part is you've got guys like Jamie and I guess Biffle and those guys and Tony Stewart who haven't won, and then you throw in David Ragan, you throw in Regan Smith, you throw in Trevor Bayne, you throw in some names like that, and Brad Keselowski, you throw in guys like that, but it's really hard to win a Cup race right now. I don't care how good you are, it's really hard to win a Cup race.
And you know the other thing, Kyle, last year I don't know that they had any real high expectations.
Yeah.
But they won the Daytona 500 right out of the box. I think that really did a lot for Jamie because, you know, he'd been kicked around a good bit.
Oh, yeah.
Gave him a lot of confidence. And, of course, he went on and had a pretty good year. This year, they've got those high expectations. And sometimes you know how hard that is to live up to.
Perhaps the pole spree will start again for Kurt Busch. He won 3 in a row. And he's at the top of the board right now in practice, Marty.
Well, for Dale Earnhardt Jr., I talked to him earlier. He said, you know, we just had the car yesterday where it was so tight I couldn't turn it. Not much better on the first run today. His quote was, the right front just wads up when I go in the corner. He said, I have to come to almost a complete stop to get this thing to turn through the corner. He said, it just doesn't roll the center at all. And Steve Letarte radio back said, is it loose anywhere? He said, absolutely not. It just will not turn. So some big changes coming here for Dale Jr.
That paint job will overcome a lot, I can tell you that.
You speak from experience. Right now, Kurt Busch at the top of the board. Regan Smith, Paul Menard, Brad Keselowski, Marcus Ambrose in the top 5. Back at Kentucky, Sprint brings you an inside look at what is happening now inside the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. Most inaugural Cup wins. Jeff Gordon, 3 times he has gone to victory lane in first-time events. For more NASCAR stats, in-car audio, and live race radio, check out NASCAR Sprint Cup Mobile at sprint.com/speed. 2001, the last time we had a new track added to the schedule. In fact, we had 2 of them, both of them 1.5 miles like here at Kentucky. Chicagoland in July, Kansas in September of that year.
These tracks for Kentucky, Kansas, and Chicago really are all kind of built at the same time. There's a big push, you know, California was right along in that same period of time. And that was a big time when the sport was just flourishing. They couldn't put in enough seats. They couldn't have enough racetracks. I mean, it was a really economic boom in the sport. And they all have similarities. But Kyle, you know, like I do, racetracks are like golf courses. They may have 18 holes, but they all play differently. And that's the way these 1.5 mile racetracks are. This track, because of the bumps, and I love the way the drivers talk about this, Kyle. They don't say, oh, the track's bumpy. I don't like this. They say, got a lot of character. Yeah. Baby's got a lot of character.
One driver who figured out the character, David Gilliland. He did it in 2006, Chris.
Yeah, he grabbed that nationwide win back in 2006, and that's going to be important because, David, you had problems yesterday in testing. You didn't get a test at all because of a crash early on. So how much are you going to have to rely on that 2006 race knowledge?
We have to rely on it quite a bit. So I remember those laps pretty well. It was a great night for us, and now to be back, we're just doing some race trim stuff. A lot of guys are in qualifying trim right now, but we're doing some race stuff. We're switching over, trying another package right here. But overall, the car felt good. It was good to be back on the track, and Kentucky Speedway is an awesome place to race.
How far behind do you feel because you missed the 6 hours yesterday?
Pretty behind. We went out and broke a right front shock. A bump stop spacer broke, and we got in the fence in turn 1 and hurt the car bad enough to where we wouldn't be able to fix it here at the track. So we had to take our backup car out and didn't get back on the track yesterday. So we're real happy the rain stopped and we got some practice in today. So it's going to be crucial for us.
Well, hopefully they can figure it out because this team's been on a roll. 2 top 20 finishes in the last 2 races. Adam?
And David, one of the many drivers, Darrell, that we have heard refer to yesterday, and this was a big day for teams to get out for a couple of reasons.
Yeah, it was an open test, and you could come and do whatever you want to. There were some teams that were manufacturers, I should say, that all had a car that had fuel injection on, and they were analyzing the fuel injection. It's the first test they'd had with it at the track, and they're getting driver input to see, are we headed in the right direction? What do we need to tweak on? So that was going on. Then the cars had telemetry on them, and you could have a car that was all decked out in telemetry to get all the data you could possibly collect. And some teams were doing that, and some teams were just getting laps around the track they'd never been to before. So it was a multiple of things that were going on yesterday, but it was an open test. You didn't even have to go through tech yesterday.
Yeah, and you know, David talks about, you know, breaking a shock mount, breaking a bump stop area, and getting into the wall. Well, they're not going to drag their backup car off the trailer, because that becomes the only car they have to race now. You know what I mean? So he probably set out yesterday, made sure that car was prepared perfectly, and gave up that time yesterday, but it does put him behind.
And what most teams did is they had a backup car. They ran their backup car in the test, and then they switched out. But some didn't. They liked that backup car so much they stuck with it as a primary this weekend. You ride on board with Tony Stewart, a special weekend for him. He lives an hour and 20 minutes up the road. He'd love to win the first race here at Kentucky.
See, he's running up the middle of the racetrack. The drivers all say that from the middle up, the track's pretty smooth. You don't feel the bumps you feel when you try to hug the yellow line around this place. Turn 3 to me, I only tested here a couple of times, but turn 3 to me was treacherous. It's a funny feeling. The car almost feels like it goes neutral or unloads on corner entry. Real free feeling getting in there. Then about the Kentucky sign over on the third turn wall over there, it starts to load back up. But see Tony going around here now. He's coming off turn 2. Wide exit on that corner. A lot of room. Big, long, wide straightaway. But right down here, right in there, the car just gets real free feeling, like it's negative load almost. And then it tightens up about right there, and you can go again.
And let's be honest. You know, these guys talk about the racetrack and the bumps in the racetrack and the character of the racetrack. Some of the places that you used to race, and we can go to Darlington and Rockingham and Wilkes, some of those places, they were incredibly bumpy. You can't believe how treacherous they were. The difference is we didn't run on bump stops. You didn't, so the car had an opportunity for the suspension to load and unload. These guys on bump stops, they feel it in their feelings. You know what I mean? When they get down in the corner, a little bump, you run over a dollar bill on the front stretch, it feels like a bump. That's how rigid these cars are.
There's no give. These things are riding solid on the front. They're sitting down solid on bump stops with no shock or spring. With shocks are holding the front down, but the spring's not doing anything. He's just riding on those bump stops.
Kyle Busch now fastest in this practice session, and right behind him, Jimmie Johnson now the number 2 man, Marty.
Yeah, pretty cool to ride along with Tony Stewart there, and Darrell was talking about where you run on the racetrack. That's been a big question mark for a lot of these drivers. Jimmie Johnson was just playing with that. He is now done with qualifying practice. They made 2 runs. He said, I want to run the top. Car's just not there to do that. Tried to run the bottom. That was really bad. So as DW was saying, kind of like in the middle of the racetrack where you sort of avoid the bumps the best you can around this racetrack, that's where Jimmie Johnson will qualify. He came in, told Chad Knaus, you know what, let's wrap up qualifying practice. Let's go into race trim.
And you see Jimmy climbing out of the race car. They will reset and go out and make some race runs. And boy, is that a good looking race car.
1971 or 2 back in Nashville, Tennessee, driving for PB Crowell. Orange and white cars with blue numbers on them like that. Campaigned them a lot in the Nationwide Series. Won a lot of races in cars painted that way. And my first win at Nashville in 1975, that's what my car looked like.
And it does say Darrell Waltrip above the door. That's Michael Waltrip driving, trying to make his 3rd start of the year in what we will call the Darrell Waltrip tribute car.
Yeah, he did that for the Hall of Fame, and you can get a close look. I'm on the hood. I got my eyes closed. I'm probably keeping that way most of the night.
Most of the race. Most of the race.
Kyle Busch is quickest at Kentucky. The NASCAR Sprint Cup Series on track at the Kentucky Speedway. 25 minutes into what will be the only practice of the day for these teams. Kyle Busch the quickest, Jimmie Johnson, Casey Kane, Kurt Busch, Brad Keselowski the top 5. 48 cars here this weekend. Qualifying later this evening. You look at the list of drivers that must qualify on speed. Here is how they rank on track in this practice session. David Strimmy at the top in that category. We just showed you that Michael Waltrip car. He's number 2 on the list. Joe Nemechek, Mike Skinner, TJ Bell, the top 5. Robbie Gordon with a second car here this weekend. The 7, his primary car is in with Scott Wimmer behind the wheel. Gordon trying to get a second one in. That's the 77. He is slowest now of those cars that must qualify on time later this afternoon.
And look at Strimmy and Michael there. A 31.71 to a 31.72, and that 1/1000th could be what gets you in the race. Just that 1/1000. We see it all the time between these go-and-go homers.
There you see Robbie Gordon on track. Landon Castle, the only car that has not been out in this practice session. You look at the top 10 right now in this practice, and there are some names up there that you can directly relate to experience here. Paul Menard in the top 10. Certainly Kyle Busch, who is quickest right now. Brad Keselowski, a number of nationwide starts here. Joey Logano in the top 10 has won the last 3 nationwide races from the pole. How does all of that experience in truck and nationwide racing here help you this weekend on the Cup side, Darrell?
It's just familiarity. You know, you're not looking for anything. You know the track, you know the bumps, you know the ins and the outs, and I think that's what a driver has to familiarize himself with new surroundings. If you've been here before, you don't waste a lot of time. But these drivers are all pros. Kyle knows this. 5-10 laps around this racetrack, and you know about as much about it as anybody that's ever been here.
Yeah, and you know, to continue that thought, it's just like watching Joey Logano. He's won the last 3 races here. The confidence level that he brings in here is tremendous. He knows where the bumps are. He knows where the grooves are. He knows how to get around somebody on the outside. He knows how to get around somebody. Then he's got to take that experience that he has in those other forms and make this car feel that way. So what they're looking for as much as anything is that feel. But like Darrell said, these guys, I don't care. You turn them loose on a brand new racetrack they've never seen. They understand how to get around it in about 5 laps.
Well, and for Joey, it wasn't just the nationwide races. A lot of testing laps here, which is huge.
Yeah, not only, well, testing in those nationwide races, but think about his last couple of weeks. On the pole at Sonoma, had a great finish, 6th. Goes to Daytona, has another great run. He comes in here with a lot of momentum, and having won here like he has, he's got to be one of the favorites to win this thing tomorrow night.
So you put a star by Joey Logano's name, and typically at a 1.5-mile track, you do the same with Denny Hamlin, Marty.
You normally would, and certainly they won at Michigan. This track, you know, 2-mile intermediate racetrack, but out of the car right now, Adam, not by design. Something is wrong with the FedEx Ground Toyota. Denny said he had a very bad vibration going down the straightaway. They think it might be in the engine compartment. They have 4 Joe Gibbs Racing engine employees here trying to diagnose what it possibly could be for Denny Hamlin, but clearly losing a lot of practice time as we're closing in on 1 hour left in this practice session. So could be a short day here for Denny Hamlin.
And Denny Hamlin, the first of 2 drivers outside the top 10 in points that have a victory. Of course, he's 11th, and 17th right now is David Ragan, who won last week at Daytona. Tonight, the big party in racing right here in the Bluegrass State. Tune in as Daytona winner David Ragan and track owner Bruton Smith join the fun. Don't miss NASCAR Trackside from Kentucky, 11 p.m. Eastern this evening on Speed.
2 winners. David Ragan right off that win last week, and Bruton Smith, he probably could run for governor of Kentucky right now and get elected pretty hands down, because not that we don't have a great governor, but Bruton is a big hero to a lot of folks in this state right now.
You know what I love about Bruton Smith is the vision, because when you look at the projects that he's taken on at all the different places, they started at one level, but he knew where he wanted to take them. And we've already seen, and if you've not been to Kentucky before this weekend, this place totally different than it was a year ago, and I'm sure will be completely different 1 year from now.
He doesn't go around making a list about what people like. He goes around and makes a list about what people don't like. What do you not like about Kentucky? What do we got to do to make you happy, to make this the biggest stop on the circuit? And whatever it is, I guarantee when we leave here, they'll start working on it.
Talk about testing time here yesterday for all these teams. Previous experience, Mark Martin, a part of a tire test here last month. Perhaps that will benefit him this weekend. The NASCAR Sprint Cup Series on track for final practice, presented by Gander Mountain. Sparta, Kentucky, a town in north central Kentucky of 1,600 people. It's going to go by leaps and bounds this weekend.
Yeah, it's just a little spot on the map, but this racetrack has certainly made it bigger than it used to be. You know, Kyle, I don't know if this means anything or not. I think it does. 8 of the fastest 12 right now ran over 100 laps in practice yesterday.
It may not, but it does today. Okay, it may not mean that somewhere else, but by God, obviously it does here.
I think so.
Because they got their stuff close enough that today they can fine tune it. And how many times do we hear these guys say, if we're close when we unload, we're good? You know what I mean? And I think that's what yesterday allowed a lot of these teams to get, is so close that today they can go back and forth from one shock setting or one shock bump stop to another and figure out where they're at.
Marty?
Well, Clint Boyer switching over to race trim. We're just talking about how important it is to unload close to where you want to be on Fridays these days. How close were you guys?
Well, we were decently close. We've struggled since we got here, really. Just trying to have some speed. So I knew qualifying was going to be off a little bit. I think I don't know, we keep going down. People keep going and making more runs and more runs. It's important to get a good run here in practice because of the new rules, so you can qualify later on in the evening when it's cool outside. But right now we got to get switched over and we can run some, make some race runs with this car. This wasn't the car we had yesterday, so it's important to get Cheerios, Hamburger Helper, Chevrolet out on the track and race trim and make some laps, see what we got.
I know also you had some throttle issues. What were you wanting out of that?
Well, sometimes when they build those, the throttle actually gets like over-indexed, and when you push on it, it's not going down right. It doesn't have that smooth feel. So it's kind of bend it down ever so slightly, so when your foot goes on, she feels good.
All right, now she feels good for Clint Boyer. Going to sit here for a little bit and go out and race trim here in a minute.
His teammate right now, Kevin Harvick, 26th quick in this practice session, and he does come to the bluegrass as the new point leader. Problems last week for Carl Edwards, as Chris Neville pointed off the top of our show. And I'll tell you, Kevin Harvick has just won 3 races, and he's the point leader again. And you get the feeling this team still needs something, but you can't argue with the results.
Well, what I like about this year, I mean, they've proven they can win races. And that's what you got to do in the chase. When you get in those final 10 races, you better be able to win a couple of them if you want to win the championship. Because I guarantee you there's a guy in the 48 car, he's going to win 2 or 3 of them, and you better be able to keep up with him.
Kevin just jumped to 18th. Perhaps he's out in qualifying trim in anticipation of qualifying that will come later today.
And talking about Harvick, Kyle, how could you ever think that Kevin Harvick would be a guy that would kind of hang back, and come on the last 4, 5, 10, 15 laps of a race and win? He's so hyper and wound up all the time. Yeah. You think he'd be knocking like a bull in a china shop.
Yeah, you would think he would be charging to the front lap after lap. And, I think he feels that way sometimes. He just doesn't have the car early in the race to get there. They amaze me how they work and work and work, and their whole race comes together in the last 15 laps. How many times have we seen it? It just all comes together for him in the last part of the race.
And you know what, Kyle? That's a smart driver.
Yeah.
When he knows he doesn't have what he needs, but he doesn't just sit there and let the race get away from him. He keeps telling his crew, I don't have what I need. I got to get better, got to get better.
And Martinsville's a good example of that. I think he showed more patience in Martinsville this year than I've ever seen Kevin show. He kept telling his guys, we're not any good. And his guys kept saying, you're running as fast as the leaders. We've just got to get you track position. And Kevin believed him and just stayed off everybody, didn't tear his equipment up, trying to bang his way to the front, let them work his way to the front. And then he was there. He was in position to kill, and that's what he did in the last 3 or 4 laps.
So I think that's the other thing, Kyle. The crew chiefs now have so much more information than what you and I maybe would have had. It was me.
I had a blackboard. What'd you have?
Well, we had a notepad. Hammond would misspell half the words for heaven's sake.
I feel bad for you sometimes when I talk to Hammond. I swear I do.
Thank you very much.
You should have won like 190 or 200 races. I'm telling you, if you hadn't had Hammond, you'd have been way over the top.
Drug him right to the top.
You want to know what's happening in the world of racing, and this is a big weekend in racing. Right here on Speed, we got you covered Sunday evening. It's 7 p.m. Eastern Time at Speed Center, a wrap-up of the weekend in motorsports. We hope you'll join us right here on the Motorsports Authority.
Kyle, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will.
Then don't.
Who was your best? When did you have your most success? Who was your best crew chief? What combination?
Honestly, I enjoyed working with Mike Beam more than anybody I ever worked with, and that was early on. I mean, I was 18 years old, 19 years old, and the King just gave us the cup car and said, go to the racetrack, and we could experiment, learn what was right, and learn what was wrong, and it was a great learning curve working with Mike, and Mike now works with Jack Roush and those guys. but really with Robin Pemberton. Robin and I just kind of, Robin had worked at Petty Enterprises, had gone away. Same time I worked with Mike Beam, Robin was there. And when Robin came back to Felix's, I enjoyed working with Felix. Smartest guy I ever worked with, and I say this hands down, bar none, Leonard Wood. Oh. Working with Leonard Wood, bumper to bumper. I mean, I'd say, car's pushing right here. And I'd say, I think we ought to, what do you think about a spring change? And he would just change a camber set or change a caster. Yeah. And I'm thinking, nobody, I never worked with anybody that did that. Man, once we set it at the shop, it was set. Yeah. We just changed springs and shocks and stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, he's the smartest guy I ever worked with.
Here's an interesting pairing when you talk about driver and crew chief. Joey Logano, young driver, working with a crew chief that's had enormous amounts of success, and Greg Zipadelli, and their teammates quickest. Sprint brings you an inside look at what is happening now inside the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. Jimmie Johnson, more wins at 1.5 tracks than any other driver. How about 15? For more NASCAR stats, in-car audio, and live race radio, check out NASCAR Sprint Cup Mobile at sprint.com/speed. Let's go to the garage with Chris Neville.
Well, it's a bit warm and humid, and tomorrow's supposed to be even warmer, and Jeff Burton is working on a new system. Last week you tried a new cool suit, new to NASCAR. I see you've got it on now. Why don't you tell the viewers at home about that system?
It's really cool. We were approached by a company that's been providing cooling systems for helicopters in the military, so they're in really adverse conditions. Iraq, Afghanistan is very hot. And the pilots were having trouble with, staying in there all day long. So they built this unit for them, and it's a quick disconnect, and we're the first team to ever use it. There's been some variations of this, but this is the latest, greatest new technology. It was declassified recently, so we've been trying it. So far, it works really, really well.
Well, Jeff is saying other variations of the system have been in motorsports, but typically those systems were a cooler filled with ice water, and in a cup race, that doesn't work very well because 3 to 4 hours into the race, you're just going to have a bunch of warm water being pumped through that vest, and this system actually has refrigerant keeping that water cool.
Now, that might work because, as Chris was saying, Kyle, did you ever try the cool suit?
I was just getting ready to say, the King tried a cool suit in 71 or 70. This stuff's been around for 100 years, has it not?
Oh, no, it has. We used to have the whole vest. You put on the vest and a net, a hair net. And that's what we started out with. And every one of us had it fail at one time or another because it was just an ice cooler. It was a cooler full of ice circulating through a mesh that you had on your body. As soon as the ice melted or it quit working, you felt like you had on an overcoat. And so, you'd use it and then you get rid of it. Well, then we got down to the hairnet, and that worked pretty good, but still it would fail. So failure was the big issue. Nobody could build anything that could last 4.5 hours.
Well, if it would change his luck, Jeff Burton would try anything. It's been a while since that team has been able to get things going in the right direction. Here's Jeff Gordon. We talked about his success at inaugural racetracks, and his teammate Jimmie Johnson, as we showed you a moment ago, the king of the 1.5 miles. Jeff Gordon, not bad. He's won 14 times at these kind of tracks. And here's Juan Pablo Montoya. He jumped up to second here in this session. He looks pretty good right now, DW.
Yeah, it sounds like they were going to change over to a qualifying trim maybe, and he's got to put down a nice lap. He's just a little wee bit off of, what is he, a 54 to a 58. Kyle is a 54, 29.54, and Juan is a 29.58. Kurt's right there at a 29.61. Kane's a 62. Johnson's a 62. Brett Keselowski's a 69. I mean, those guys in the first 5 or 6 spots are just laying all over the top of each other.
Yeah, and from 7th to 15th, they're all in the 70s. Doesn't it always, this still constantly, and it always has since as long as I've been around this sport, is how so many teams with so many different guys from so many different areas and work on them in different shops, and they can bring their cars to the racetrack and all run within a tenth of each other. That absolutely tells you how competitive this sport is. I mean, I don't care if you work on it in Welcome, North Carolina, or out at Concord at the airport, or up on Lake Norman in a big fancy shop, wherever it is. All these guys are so close to each other.
And since you're up here with me and I don't have to listen to Larry or Jeff, it's all about the driver. That's
good one.
That's what makes the difference.
That's going to get back to him. You know that.
No, I'm telling you. Hey, Cal, do you ever sit on a toolbox and eat ice cream during a race?
Never, never, ever.
What's the latest on the 11 team, Marty?
Well, a lot of analysis going on here with Denny Hamlin, and so what finally was it?
I don't know, the crank looks bent, so Not really sure, to be honest with you.
I thought we had just decided that it was a pulley, so that's not it, right?
Oh, it's not a pulley.
Okay, so they thought it was a pulley. They've been politicking with NASCAR here for the last few minutes to maybe get this engine changed, but as you heard Denny say, the crank may be bent, but this practice may also be over for Denny Hamlin as well, guys, heading to the hauler.
Now, when the driver walks out of the garage with this much time left in the session, that's not a great sign. And for Joe Gibbs Racing, we were talking about it earlier, it's been a tough year in the engine category. 4 times drivers have gone to the rear pre-race because of an engine change.
I don't know, and I've raced a pretty long time, but I've never seen many bent cranks. That's like bending an animal. You know what I mean? I don't know how you would bend one. My point is, I don't know how you would bend one just running. You know what I mean? Just out on the racetrack run. I know which team had trouble. The 47 team, Bobby Labonte. They let the car down on top of the pull bar, and it bent the pulleys and bent everything, and they were afraid that it had moved the crank and bent some of that stuff. But a crank it's the largest component besides the block in the engine, is it not?
And it's really rigid.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly.
I never really knew you could bend one. I knew you could break one.
I knew you could break one,
yeah.
And you break them when they galled up, when the pistons galled up and stuff like that, when the bearings, and they put so much heat in them. I've just never heard of one bending, and that's why they were looking at the pulleys, I assume.
Here's something he and I both can identify with. It's like the femur in your leg.
Yes.
You don't bend it very far.
No, it snaps pretty quick, baby. It snaps pretty quick.
Saw the Valvoline colors for A.J. Allmendinger. Meanwhile, Kyle Busch back on top. He's run 5 laps in this session, and he was quickest in nationwide practice yesterday evening. We talked about the fact that he won in Truck Series competition last night. He's kind of got it all figured out, doesn't he?
Now, let me ask you something, Kyle. Do you think last night he went to the rear of the field just so he could pass all those guys and win the race?
Sometimes I do believe he just needs a little extra challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't think that he would do that, do you?
All right. No, but I'm going to go down a road that's going to make everybody mad.
Go ahead. I'm right behind you.
All
I'll
right,
be
big boy.
you.
How many, when you know, you run the Cup Series, all right, got what, 83 wins? 84, excuse me. Excuse me. I just threw that out. I threw that out because I wanted to hear you. I just wanted to see if you give me a Bobby Allison answer.
Don't go there.
Okay. All right. How many? Then it was called Grand National Racing.
Yeah.
All right. And you'd run at Charlotte and run those races. How many of those you win?
Well, I have credit for 13.
Okay. So 94 plus 13 is 97. 84 plus 13 is 97.
Right.
All right. Did they ever say Darrell Waltrip 97 NASCAR race wins?
No.
Then I'm sick and freaking tired of hearing Kyle Busch 98 NASCAR wins. He's won 21 Cup races. Compare Cup to Cup, nationwide to nationwide, and truck to truck. I'm sorry, that's a Kyle Petty opinion, but they don't do it with anybody but Kyle Busch. You never hear him say Mark Martin's got 100 wins with his Cup and his nationwide. You don't hear it with Darrell. You don't hear it with Dale Sr. You don't hear it with guys like that. They only do it with Kyle because he runs all 3 divisions, and you never had an opportunity when you were racing in your prime to run 3 divisions.
No, but see, my driver rating was never as high as Kyle's.
Your driver rating was incredibly high.
Quite honestly,
you got 3 championships.
I never made that many quality passes,
84,
particularly under green going down the back straightaway.
You can take those stats and you know what you can do with them. 84 wins and 3 championships. That speaks for itself.
I'm glad we're going to break. Speed's coverage of NASCAR Sprint Cup final practice from Kentucky, brought to you by the biggest Labor Day party in the USA at Atlanta Motor Speedway, with 3 nights of racing and a pre-race concert by Leonard Skinnard, and by Sprint, proud sponsor of the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. So if you're just joining us, we had the opening practice of the weekend rain out earlier. Opening practice of the day. It was scheduled for 11:30 Eastern time. This becoming the only practice. And now we understand there's rain on the radar. If qualifying were to get washed out, which is scheduled for 5 o'clock later today, we would have to go to the rule book, and that would mean 5 cars would go home. Michael Waltrip, David Strimmy, T.J. Bell, Robbie Gordon, David Starr. The 43 that make the field would be set on how they run in this practice. So time to get things together.
Yeah, you could be, you could be fighting for your starting position right now.
Absolutely.
Based on what kind of time you put up here during this practice session.
And that would be good for Brad Keselowski, who's 6th right now, Chris.
Yeah, and he's pretty happy with the car. Brad, this is your Kansas car that you won in just a couple weeks ago. You pretty happy to be back behind the wheel?
I am. You know, that feels good. I got my info from here. I didn't even know it was that car. So, you know, it's been a pleasure to drive the Miller Lite Dodge lately. We've been running good, and we just got to execute, and we'll have a good finish here in Kentucky and maybe have a shot at the win. You know, I leaned a lot on my teammate, Kurt Busch. He found some good speed here yesterday, and we put his setup in and seemed to, you know, start off practice really good here. So we'll see how it is in race trim, and hopefully it carries over.
And you've got 3 starts in Nationwide here, 2 in trucks. Does that track time help out?
You know, it helps out a little, but you know, so much changes every year that you know, kind of gets offset. You know, usually you come to a track that you know when nobody else does, and at least you know where the garages and stuff are at, but they changed all that too, so there's not a lot of advantages, and we didn't get that test day yesterday and kind of negated it all, so I think we're all on the same playing field.
Thanks, Brad.
You know, Adam, when another driver says we put someone's setup in the car, most likely every driver kind of tunes differently, and there are probably 3 devices that you could get information from another team or another car that would help yours. One would be, how big is your sway bar? Because they run humongous sway bars. The other would be, because of the bumps, what's your shock package? And the other would be, how much right rear spring do you have in the car? Those are 3 points on the car that will make the car feel totally different if you're off in any of those 3 areas.
So as a driver, Kyle, how far down the checklist do you go, as you see Marcus Ambrose on track, before you say, let's go to someone else's setup? I mean, there are obviously things that you want to change as a driver. How far down the line do you go before you say, let's punt and do something else?
Well, if you talk to these guys, they come in with a game plan now. We're used to the game plan was the driver. If I was working with Darrell and Darrell's driving the car, I have a basic setup for what I think is going to work at Kentucky. Darrell goes out, and he helps me fine-tune it. He's like, I'm a little tight here, I'm a little loose there. You rebound, you adjust. But these guys come in with, you know, on their bump stops, with the attitude of the car, with the roll rate of the car. There's so many variables, and just like Darrell says, you talk about rear spring, you talk about bar, you talk about things. I'm going to set the attitude of the car. You go out and feel it and see if you like the feel of that attitude. If you don't like that attitude, I've got to change it.
And the other thing is, Adam, when I roll into my pit stall and I look up at my scoring monitor, if I'm on the left side of the screen, I'm relatively happy. If I'm on the right side of the screen, I'm starting to scream, we got to do something, boys. We got to do it fast.
Jeff Gordon's on the left side right now, Marty.
Yeah, currently 13th, Adam, and at the very end of practice, they did something a little interesting we haven't seen guys do in quite a while. Jeff Gordon went out, ran a very soft lap on a set of sticker tires, and they scuffed them for qualifying. Jeff said when he went out on sticker tires, it was just way too loose, so they ran it in just a little bit. See them taking very good care of those tires as they came off the car. Very likely those will be the tires that Jeff Gordon does qualify on, and a lot of teams now talking about maybe scuffing a set of tires for qualifying, guys. We haven't seen that in quite a while, have we, Adam?
It has been a while, Darrell.
And we saw that yesterday. I heard some of the truck guys say that, and I think that's one of the products of what testing did for you yesterday. Michael told me that he went out on a set of stickers and almost spun out, and he ran his quickest lap on his 26th lap. We've seen that. When you have a tire that's pretty conservative, the longer you run it, the better it gets. And buffing that new off of it just gives it some instant grip. You don't have to wait for it to come in as you come to the green.
And I've heard a lot of drivers talk about Kentucky in particular and how edgy it is when it comes to qualifying.
Well, it will be because these turns are huge. You know, one of the drivers said something, I hadn't thought about it, that if you took an aerial view of this racetrack, Kyle, he said the thing almost looked like an oval.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you're turning almost all the way around this racetrack. A little bit down the back straightaway, but the turn off of 2 is so big and sweeping into 3 that you don't go straight, but just for a little short distance.
And Darrell talked about it earlier, talked about going in 3 and how you feel like the car goes through a neutral state, and then it almost lands like you're off camber. I mean, and it almost feels like you're on the other side of the car, like you go from the driver's seat to, so it's got a strange feel to it. So if you drive past that point where you can actually feel the car, and you know, it's funny how we've had a couple of different drivers talk about throttle locations, which is strange, because you drive the car with your hands, you drive the car with the seat of your pants and your back in the seat. You can feel the car, but you feel it in your feet too. If you go through that stage where you don't feel the car, you don't know how to react to the car. This place is a lot flatter to a driver than what it seems. We sit up here and it looks like you got bank in turn 1 and bank down here, and like the front stretch is banked a little bit. When you're out there, it's almost like it's banked the opposite way.
Yeah.
The least amount of banking here at Kentucky Speedway of any of the mile-and-a-half tracks. Kansas not too far off. Kyle Busch quickest. We're about an hour into a 90-minute practice session for Sprint Cup teams.
Is he really?
Yeah. Don't ask for an autograph when you're talking to your crew chief. What if you don't know that's your crew chief?
Yeah.
Tuesday, baseball's biggest stars will gather together in the Arizona desert for one spectacular night in the summer's biggest event. As Fox brings you every thrilling moment of the 2011 MLB All-Star Game. Coverage begins Tuesday live from Phoenix at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific, only on Fox. And don't forget, you can see a special world premiere sneak preview of the upcoming Fox show, The X Factor, during the broadcast. So you got David Ragan, who got his first career win last week at Daytona. How about an assist for the teammate, Matt Kenseth, who right now in this practice session is 12th?
Kyle, if I was at Daytona racing the way they raced last week, and I had to have somebody to help me win the race.
There's your guy.
I'd look in my rearview mirror and I'd be pretty happy when I saw that guy behind me.
And you know, I thought Matt, and I said it up here when we went to break a minute ago because we were showing Matt. Matt did something and showed leadership and maturity when he talked to David on the radio and asked David, where are you going to go on the racetrack? And David said, I'm not sure, I may go here, I may go there. And he said, well, just don't go too high and open up a lane. And what he was basically doing was teaching David. That was a lesson. That was a lesson from a veteran driver who had won at Daytona and who had won championships. And then he said, I'm going to be right here with you. I'm going to push you. I'm not going to try to do anything. It's me and you. And I think that showed commitment from the team-wise for Roush Racing and from him, but at the same time, I think it showed a lot of respect between those two drivers.
And respect, Kyle, if Matt Kenseth had come on that radio and said, we can win this race if I'm in front.
Yeah.
I'm faster than you are. You need to get behind me and push me. That would have, David Ragan would have respected Matt Kenseth and said, okay, we'll do it.
That's exactly, because I think they have that with each other. You know what I mean? And that's important for a teammate. You don't hear them screaming at each other. You know, we heard a couple of teammates that felt like they got hung out down there towards the end of the race. But I don't think you would ever, we didn't hear that from any of the Roush guys last year or in February or any time this year.
The hook is out in the 11 garage area, Marty.
Yeah, and that's not good. I just talked to Chris Woodward, who's the head engine tuner for the 11 team, and they are going to change this engine. He described the problem as an internal problem on the engine for Denny Hamlin, so they have the backup engine out here ready to change it, and I believe that means they'll start the back of the field, Adam.
Indeed it does. Now, a lot of teams changed engines from what they ran yesterday, but yesterday, not a part of the official race weekend. Once you put your car through the inspection line and you present a car for a race weekend, which happened this morning, and you change an engine by the one engine rule, you go to the back regardless, before, after qualifying, whatever. Here's Martin Truex Jr., a little different look for him, paint scheme-wise this week. He's 15th right now. Teammate David Rudiman right behind him in 16th, and they spent a lot of time nose to tail in the draft last week at Daytona.
They had a lot of incentive.
Oh yeah, they did.
Rob Kaufman, one of the owners over there with Michael, he put up $1 million to those boys if they could win the race. And they were trying, man. There was a time in there when I said, oh, Rob better get his checkbook out.
Kyle Busch continues quickest here in this practice as we go under 30 minutes remaining. Juan Pablo Montoya went out and made a practice qualifying run. He's second. Kurt Busch, Casey Kane, Jimmy Johnson remain the top 5. Daryl, you were talking earlier about left side or right side of the board. Here you see David Ragan. He's on the left. He's 7th. But I'm going to look over on the right side of the board and look at a name, Tony Stewart, 31st. He's put up 38 laps in this practice.
You know, and just most likely he hadn't made a qualifying run. Most likely he's working on his race runs right now, and they may switch over here. Looking at the sky, if I were going to make a qualifying run, I'd do it pretty soon, I believe.
Yeah, and you listen exactly what I think you're spot on. When you look at the bottom of the page, on the 5-lap average, Tony Stewart has the best 5-lap average. When you look at the 10-lap average, meaning he ran 10 laps in a row, he has the best 10-lap average. And he's ahead of a lot of these guys that are on the left side of the board.
And I think, you know, I think Kyle Busch may have made a believer out of some of these guys last night, too. Maybe it's not so important where I start in this race tomorrow night, because you can obviously make one of the things I've always loved about this racetrack, you can pass on it. There's passing on the bottom, passing on the top. I've always liked that.
Let's hear from Greg Biffle, Marty.
Well, currently 20th on the charts, but let's deal with the important stuff first. How's being a dad 3 days in?
Pretty good so far. Just can't wait till we get qualifying in. I get to go home and see her and to come back tomorrow for the race. So 3 and 4 Fusion running pretty good. You know, we're not as good at qualifying trim as we want to be, but we're really happy with our car in race trim. We're getting ready to go back out in race trim, finish up.
What's the one surprising thing you've learned about this track in a day and a half?
You know, surprised that the groove is as high as it is, a faster way around. I thought the bottom would have more grip or a little more speed, but it doesn't, so it's going to make it interesting.
Tell you what, a lot of guys are talking about that. They're saying almost rim riding in race trim is probably the best way to go around.
Greg Biffle has won an inaugural race here, the first truck race. He went to victory lane back in 2000. Tony Stewart, the quickest of those who have made a 10-lap run. Regan Smith, Paul Menard, Jeff Burton, Matt Kenseth, the top 5 in that category. Less than 25 minutes remaining in NASCAR Sprint Cup Series final practice presented by Gander Mountain. Kyle Busch leading the way. Juan Pablo Montoya, Kurt Busch, Casey Kane, Jimmy Johnson, the top 5 in this session. And here's Brian Vickers on track.
Yeah, everybody's been on the racetrack now. We're looking at Brian Vickers. The last car to go out, I think, that hadn't practiced was Landon Kessel in the 51 car. Saw him lead pit road there a bit ago.
And Landon's now turned 8 laps. He's 30th on the practice sheet. Told you about Tony Stewart. It turned 38 laps. That count up to 43 now as you see Mark Martin. Whoa. Bouncing around, wasn't he? Was that a product of the bumps, Darrell?
Yeah, it definitely was, and you see that he didn't like that at all. And they may have made some sort of change on the car. Yeah, actually almost missed pit road. That was so bad he aborted. He came right on in.
You know you're bad when you can't get on pit road. That's a bad day for you.
She was bouncing coming on pit road. Kyle, I think about rough racetracks. I don't know if you remember the first race on the old High Bank Nashville track there at the fairgrounds when it was 36 degrees of banking.
Oh my God!
They came in there. It was on the TV that one of the big deals. It was going to be a live TV race on Saturday afternoon. That track was so rough it would knock the oil pans off the engines. I mean, it was amazing.
That's a rough race. These guys don't know what rough is sometimes with some of the stuff.
Now Denny Hamlin, those boys, they wouldn't have had that problem.
No.
See, because they got theirs tucked up in there nice and neat. But
there we go. Little reference to Michigan there. That's okay. I see you.
You remember when Ryan Newman came on the scene driving for Roger Penske? He was doing what they called the ABC program. A was for ARCA.
Yeah.
B was for what was then the Busch Series, now the Nationwide Series. C for Cup, a handful of each of those classes. His first ARCA win came right here at Kentucky, and I guess now you know the rest of the story. The ABC program worked on up to D, E, and F, and I believe he's gone through the alphabet now, Darrell.
Yeah, he's got a pretty good handle on this place.
His teammate in the garage, Marty, what can you tell us?
Well, Adam, you mentioned nobody's turned more laps today than Tony Stewart, and I talked to Darren Grubb before this practice started. They really came in with a plan kind of the opposite of everybody else. They came in working on race trim. That's really all they were going to worry about. If they got one qualifying run in, they were going to go for it then. So that's still their goal. Very happy in race trim. In fact, Tony kind of has noticed that the track may be slowing down just a little bit. They also may be racing the weather. A lot of guys talking about some weather to our west, but they're going to stick with race trim for now on this 14 car. Extremely happy with the way it's handling in race trim, Adam.
And so many times there are drivers you feel can start deep in the field and make a run to the front. Certainly Tony Stewart fits that category. Yikes. Marty wasn't lying. You saw the skies. Kyle Busch still at the top of the board. Wednesday, Adam Carolla brings his serious love of cars and seriously funny point of view to Speed with the Car Show, and nothing is off limits. The Car Show premieres this Wednesday, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific, only on Speed.
If he doesn't quit eating those spark plugs, he's not going to be able to talk. I'll tell you.
The promos have been entertaining. Chris, let's hear from Joey Logano.
Yeah, the MLB All-Star Game right around the corner. Talk about a batting average in NASCAR. Joey Logano, 3 nationwide starts here, 3 wins. Joey, obviously you got this place figured out, but you said you still need a little bit more speed out of the 20.
Yeah, for sure. You know, our Home Depot cars, it's decent. You know, our qualifying trim was, I think it's top 10, somewhere like that. But, you know, our race trim stuff is, we get the car driving good, just not enough speed in the car. So we're changing some things up. I'm sure I'm fighting the same thing as everyone else out there. You know, it seems like you're always loose into 3 if you're on the bottom, and you move up top, and it fixes all your problems. So I think if we can get the thing to work on the bottom, we'll be able to race cars a lot better. But I think that's really, really, really hard to do. So we'll see what happens tonight in the nationwide race. I think I'll learn a lot tonight for tomorrow.
All right, good night tonight, Joey.
He's smart. You know why? Because he's won the last 3 nationwide races here, so he's just wearing that nationwide uniform out. You know what I mean? Superstitious, huh?
I would be.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure, Kyle. I had a pair of socks that I thought were lucky. I had hate to admit it, I had some underwear I thought was lucky.
I had underwear, baby. I had underwear.
I had a uniform and I thought maybe was lucky.
I had underwear I thought was lucky on the track and off the track.
No, Kyle. That's wrong.
Sorry, I just thought I'd throw that out.
No, that's TMI.
See Andy Lally on track. He was here last night watching the truck race from the grandstands and perhaps trying to get an education. And he could use a little help right now because he is 3rd from the bottom of those drivers that must qualify on time, and 5 will go home tonight.
Had a nice qualifying run last week, though. Doug Richard over there with this guy, and they seem to be making a little bit of progress.
They are, and I was going to say the same thing. They're making progress. You got to appreciate a guy, and we see it with Juan, and you see it with other guys who come from another formula of racing, another type of racing. And you think an oval track racing is just driving down in the corner until you see God turning the thing and then getting back on the gas and going. But there's an art to racing like this. There's a feel, there's something you have to develop. And you don't just jump out of one type of formula, open wheel, whatever it may be, and come over here. We see so many people struggle. I think he's made huge progress this year. And with Doug, I think he's made a lot of progress in the last few weeks.
One of the things that I think people don't realize is that other kinds of cars, open wheel cars, sports cars, the tires are so much bigger. They got great big tires on them, and they got tremendous amounts of downforce. That's driver security, and you can do things in a car like that that you're never going to be able to do in a stock car.
Marty?
It's amazing what a little momentum will do for you. For David Ragan, last week's winner, very happy to be here at Kentucky. And you heard Joey Logano about trying to get the car to work on the bottom, except David Ragan's problem is the exact opposite. His car too tight on the bottom. That's what they've been working on in this practice session. And I just talked to Drew Blickensderfer, and he said, we're kind of praying for some rain because these guys right now, 7th fastest on the chart. I think they would take starting 7th on Saturday night, Adam.
And we have made the remark more than once today, Darrell, about how much this racing surface, especially when you look at how the tires have blackened up the corners, how much it looks like concrete. This is an asphalt track.
I'm just not real sure why people quit sealing racetracks. You know, the sealer that they use on drag strips, it increases grip. There was a time when Dover, Darlington, a whole bunch of racetracks used to seal at Richmond. Used to put sealer on the racetracks.
Remember Richmond?
Oh, wow, yeah.
Everybody complained.
But after it wore down,
it was good. But when you first went out on it, it was terrible, man.
Looked like it had been raining.
Yeah, and then it would wear down, and it got that layer of grip. It got to that layer of sealant that you needed to really run good.
Yeah, and I think they got better stuff now, too. Yeah. That was just bear grease.
You know, talking about the 6 car, you know, we heard Logano say, if I go in on the bottom, I'm loose. If I move to the top, it fixes. And you heard the 6 car and David Ragan talk about his car's pushing. Well, it's pushing because he's probably comfortable getting in the corner, not feeling that freeness getting in the corner. But then when he needs to turn it, he can't turn it. And he's afraid to free it up anymore getting in the corner because now you're back to what Joey was talking about. You can't get it snug enough to get into turn 3.
15 minutes remaining in this practice session. Kyle Busch put up a lap about the midway point, and it's still at the top. 29.54 seconds has Busch there. Getting down to it in Sprint Cup final practice from the Kentucky Speedway in Sparta, Kentucky. Cup teams visiting here for the first time ever. Juan Pablo Montoya on track, making a late run here in the practice session. He is 2nd right now behind Kyle Busch. The elder Busch 3rd, Casey Kane 4th, and Jimmy Johnson 5th. See Kyle here. Talk about Casey Kane in the top 5. You know, we mentioned the 12 winners in 17 races, those 7 drivers that didn't win last season. Then you throw in Joey Logano, who's hot, Casey Kane, who hasn't won in a while, Dale Earnhardt Jr. I mean, it's anybody's guess who may start filling victory lane.
It is, but do you think any chance Kyle could do the sweep this weekend?
Yeah, I do. And I do. You know what I mean? And I mean, we've seen it. He's done it before. You know what I'm saying? And he's done it before. And I think this is the kind of place that lends itself to him. You know what I mean? We've seen it in the Nationwide car. You know he can do it there. You know, the Cup stuff is going to be the clincher for him.
Well, if he does, he runs 3 nights. I guess he'd take Sunday off, right?
He'd probably take Sunday off.
Maybe not. Wrong.
No,
he's running a late model race up in Indiana, Slinger, Salem, Winchester, somewhere. I don't remember where it was.
You know, there are 7 different tracks where Kyle has won in all 3 of NASCAR's touring series. And, of course, the sweep, the trifecta that Kyle Petty talked about a minute ago, coming at Bristol last August. And if you believe in history repeating itself, he lost an engine in that truck race qualifying, had to start at the back, drove through the field and won. But he missed the drivers meeting yesterday for truck competition because of all of the Sprint Cup testing. Started in the back, drove through and won. So perhaps he's got a little something going on. How about Matt Kenseth, Marty?
Well, I would say that Matt Kenseth is pretty happy with his race car. They've made 4 qualifying runs to start off with, and he was 12th fastest in that, Adam, and then they made some race runs after that. So very happy with the race car. They've made very few changes to it. His biggest complaint, a little too loose in turns 1 and 2. And this race car, this is the car he had at Michigan a few weeks ago. And I think at that race been about, what, about 2 laps longer, Adam? I think he might have won that race as well.
This feels like a Matt Kenseth track, and when you talk about momentum, Paul Menard's been pretty good lately.
He has been, but just back to Kenseth real quick. I believe if you want to look at a guy that could maybe dethrone Jimmy Johnson this year, I wouldn't look too much further than Matt Kenseth. I know that Kevin Harvick's going to be tough because he was last year, but Kenseth looks really consistent, very consistent at the front.
Tomorrow, NASCAR Race Day, Rocks, Kentucky. Joey Logano joins us live to discuss his recent success in the Bluegrass State. Plus, fresh off his Daytona win, we break down the roller coaster career of David Ragan. NASCAR Race Day, built by the Home Depot, live from right here at Kentucky. It's tomorrow afternoon at 4:30 Eastern Time on Speed. So as Paul Menard continues to hit the track, here's Tony Stewart waiting to go out. Will he make a qualifying run? Well, we'll find out when we return. Speed's presentation of NASCAR Sprint Cup final practice from Kentucky, presented by Gander Mountain. Gear up at Gander Mountain. We live outdoors. And brought to you in part by Fram. Fram filters help make sure failure is not a part of your engine's life. Don't fail your engine. Use Fram. So when we went to break, Tony Stewart was sitting on pit road. He has gone out and made a fast lap, Darrell.
Yeah, up to 9 quick. Huge pickup. So tape and tires, just what he needed. He's happy with it in race run. He's got to be pretty happy with that qualifying run, too.
I think he has laid a nice foundation here. In this practice session, Tony Stewart has turned 45 laps. He is quickest of those that have run 10 consecutive, and is now 9th on the board after going out and making a practice qualifying run. And one driver we haven't talked much about, Jeff Burton, he is first of those drivers that have made a 15-lap run in this session. Racing Electronics is offering speed viewers a year-long inside deal. Reserve your next scanner or fan view online for any NASCAR race and save $10. Visit speed.com/deals and click on the Racing Electronics banner for more information. David Rudiman and Martin Truex Jr., drivers that have joined Jeff Burton in the 15 consecutive lap category. And here's Paul Menard, who is 10th in the session with just over 5 minutes remaining.
Another guy that had a great run last week as well.
You look at Paul lately. I mean, 8th last week. He was 4th a couple of weeks ago at Michigan, and sandwiched in and around that in Finion, where he was strong, and Pocono, where he finished just outside the top 10 but had a speeding penalty. I mean, that team performance-wise has been really solid.
And I've been wanting to see how they were going to react in the second half of the year, because if you remember back to last year, he was in the top 10 in the points up to about May, Charlotte, I think it was. And from there, that team fell off the map. Now I know it was at over Richard Petty Motorsports. They were going through a lot of turmoil over there. That probably had a little bit to do with it. But I was curious to see if he and Slugger Landry were going to be able to keep the performance up in the second half of the year. And so far, they are answering the bell pretty darn good.
Well, and they had a fall off, strong start, fall off, and they've recovered. That is a sign of people that know how to get it done.
Yep.
Here's Martin Truex Jr. making a run late in the session. Less than 5 minutes to go now. Qualifying later today at 5 p.m. Eastern time on speed. Michael Waltrip, Joe Nemechek, Mike Skinner right now, the quickest of those in the go or go home category. We wrap up practice after a break from the Kentucky Speedway. 2 minutes remaining in Sprint Cup final practice from Kentucky. Kyle Busch, Juan Pablo Montoya, Kurt Busch, Casey Kane, Jimmy Johnson, the top 5. One thing they all have in common, they've turned at least 35 laps in this session, and obviously they're all fast. Then you got Denny Hamlin. He's 26th, so he's not great on the speed chart, but Darrell, the number that jumps out to me, 2 laps turned and an engine change. This team's got some adversity to overcome.
Good thing they got a teammate that knows 2 teammates, really. One won last night, one has won 3 races in a row here. But look out on the racetrack right now. I think every car in the garage is out on the racetrack. It looks like the race is going on.
To run as much as they ran yesterday, it's hard to believe there's that many cars on the racetrack with 5 minutes to go. I mean, it really is. But I think everybody's just getting that one last feel, that one last thing, that one last, was that the right bump stop? Was that the right thing? And they're taking all that data. You know how it is. Sometimes you got way too much data. You know what I mean? It's like, how did I decipher this? But I think they're all just looking for that one last confirmation. That's good, that's bad. Either way, they're just looking for it.
You know what you're going to hear, though, from some of those guys? I needed 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
We just had 5 more minutes.
That's true.
Well, they get 2 laps of qualifying later this afternoon, and that is it. You can put them in the barn and wait for tomorrow night in the inaugural Sprint Cup race here at Kentucky.
107,000 folks will be packed in this joint tomorrow night. What a show it's going to be. They got a great pre-race show. I know the race will be fantastic.
Are you going to sing the national anthem?
I'm going to hold the flag.
Oh, there we go. There we go. I thought you were going to break out some Ralph Emery on me here.
Oh, yeah, I could.
There you go.
Stay up all night on WSM.
There you go.
All night radio.
They have found a job for everyone. Darrell Waltrip going to hold the flag.
I'm actually going to drive a Mustang for the First Lady tomorrow night in the parade lap. Little pink Mustang, little program she's got going on.
The red and black flags are in the air, and Sprint Cup final practice is over. Kyle Busch wins the session. Jeff Gordon 14th. He tries for his 4th inaugural victory here tomorrow evening as we look at what happened in the practice session. Jimmy Johnson in the top 5. Carl Edwards second in points with 7th, and there's David Ragan, last week's winner, in the top 10. Marcus Ambrose at the top of page 2. Matt Kenseth, last week's runner-up, 13th. Joey Logano in the top 15. Biffle and Burton leading off page 3. Mark Martin outside the top 25. Quickest to the go-or-go homers, David Stremme. Time now for NASCAR Live with Chris Devoda.